So, hi, good afternoon. 37th edition of Munich Film Festival. My name is Sophia Glasel. I'm one of the programmers here, and I'm here with my colleague Christoph Gröner, our artistic director, and I'm really happy that he joined us this afternoon because I think the talk we're going to have is going to be covering a wide and rather wild range of topics, such as martial arts, death metal, and Dachshunds. And yeah, as you know, our festival opened last night with the film The Art of Self-Defense, and we are really happy that the director and lead actor of the film join us here today again.
So please welcome and give a big and warm applause to Riley Stearns and Jesse Eisenberg.
Thank you, Sophia. Hello, thank you for coming.
If we could have a fourth microphone, that would help immensely. So if anybody has a spare microphone to give to us, thank you so much, because we're 4 people. Yeah, exactly. that would be you shouting. Guys, so thank you so much for being here with us. And yeah, now it's okay. So put on the mic over there, please, for questions from the audience. The Art of Self-Defense, yesterday night, the opening of the festival. Guys, thank you so much for being here with us. It's an incredible honor, and it's an incredibly original film. So the nucleus could be, if we want to take it from there, being crazily original. I would like to pitch it, because you don't want to spoil anything about the film, because it spoils the fun. How would you describe the film to tell it to audiences that have probably yet not seen it? Some of them, some of the people that are here have, of course, seen it yesterday. Others have not. So please describe the film.
I mean, the elevator pitch for me is Jesse plays a man named Casey who gets mugged at the very beginning of the film and decides to take up karate to learn how to defend himself. And he starts to relate to it and feel like he finds this sense of belonging in the academy until he starts getting sucked into this kind of hyper-masculine, toxic environment and realizes that there's some screws loose with the sensei of the academy, and it just gets darker and weirder from there.
It's a long elevator ride. Sorry. Yeah. What floor do you live on? Jesus.
Well, the way that the elevators work at our hotel, I think that
it's slow.
I could have.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very slow.
Yeah.
I could have said that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You probably just sold the film to quite big of an audience. So maybe we want to start off with how the two of you got involved into the project. Riley, you wrote the script. How did you find Jesse for the role of Casey? Because you own the role so much. It feels as if it would have been, well, written for you. How did that work?
When I read the script, like, I thought the first 10 pages or 5 pages were really, really funny and very well written, but I had an aversion to it because of exactly what you said. It felt like a character I would have, it feels like an obvious character for me to play when I read it. And so I didn't really want to do it, but I thought the script was so funny that I decided to keep reading just to see, because it's very rare to read very funny, genuinely funny dialogue. So I kept reading it and realized that it's actually a total bastardization and perverse version of the kind of weak link turns into a hero kind of movie. Like Riley so brilliantly uses the structure of these kind of sports movies where the weak protagonist finds his inner strength and takes over. But he turned it into this really perverse telling of that, which becomes a brilliant satire on the absurdity of masculinity.
Yeah, and I initially, and Jesse is very inquisitive. In our first conversation that we had, he asked me, "So who'd you offer to before me?"
Did I say that?
You said something like that, where you were like, Like, who are you looking at prior to me? Like, because that sometimes happens.
It was that's like there's a
Sort of like that, right?
No, it's because remember, I had heard
That must,
from a
or
friend
that,
of a
yeah.
friend or something.
So, but I was looking at people who were kind of a little bit older at first, because I did initially, when I was writing, I thought it would be more interesting and a little sadder if this guy was maybe in his 40s and he still felt like didn't feel like a man, and he started taking karate and was in a class with teenagers and wearing a gi and a white belt, and I just thought that image was funny. But we did also find that there was a kind of an aversion from guys that age to the material. I mean, one actor in particular said that he couldn't play a weak character. And you and I were like, that's just proving the point of this movie. Like that in his mind, he had to be more of a man than this character was allowing him to be. And we kind of went a little bit younger in age, and Jesse was the first person that we thought of, and we're both at the same agency, and so they passed it along to him. He read it over a weekend, and I got an email that Monday after the weekend saying, oh my God, I would love to be in this, and where are you, can we meet? And yeah, it happened very organically from that point on.
By the way, who has seen the film yesterday? Are there many people in the audience? This is open to your questions. This is open to your questions, of course, as well. There's a microphone over there. So if there's a question, please step up, go to the microphone, because we share this online. And so it's beautiful if also the questions can be shared. I would like to turn the question around, but did you write the script with Jesse in mind at some point?
No, I mean,
No, okay.
I do try to, especially being a younger filmmaker, and this is only my second feature, you try to not write with people in mind, because chances are they're not going to do it. Honestly, there's just too many other projects, and too many things can happen, too many variables. So I didn't want to be closed off to that, to anybody. And so I write kind of with kind of a blank face in mind, and then later on, after I've written the script, then we start talking about who could be right. Meetings help, because I don't want to work with bad people, and so it's nice to meet with somebody and say they're a good person, they get the project, they're doing it for the right reasons. So for all those reasons, I try not to write with people in mind.
So, but this one thing said yesterday by Jesse was like, I rarely read such a brilliant script. So it takes a lot of work to go to that point where you get a script that's so beautiful. So I wanted to ask you, Riley, how long are you working generally? Have you been working on Faults, or have you been working on your second feature now, The Art of Self-Defense? I suppose it's a very long process.
In terms of writing?
In terms of writing.
So my writing process usually consists of an idea that percolates for up to a year. With Faults, I think I had that in my head for about 8 months before I started the script itself. So I'm almost going through the rewriting process in my head. So the time that I get to the script, I've outlined, not filling in every single blank, because sometimes the fun in writing is discovering things along the way. There's elements in Faults that are some of my favorite parts that I discovered while writing it, and not during the outlining. And Self-Defense is no exception. It's a very spoiler thing, so I'm not going to talk about it, but there's one moment in particular that I found completely by accident during the writing process. But Faults was a 2-week writing process. I wrote every day for 2 weeks and finished that, and then met with the producers, pitched them the idea for the movie. They liked it, and I said, okay, well, I have the script too, so I can give that to you. And they ended up a week later saying that they wanted to make it. And with Self-Defense, I had the idea in my head for about 6 months, I want to say, where I was working on how it would kind of come together, and then outlined it, and then the writing process was probably 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one initial idea must be, of course, your practice of martial arts, of jiu-jitsu in your case. So there was a moment when you felt, or for a long time probably, oh wow, this is like the perfect basis, like male rituals to work on that, and then like a heightened sense of looking at people, how they behave probably in that environment. Because what I have to say, what I feel, and I don't know if you feel like that, there's a great sense in like the portrayal of the dojo or the school that is really close to reality at first, and then it goes berserk.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the same could be said with people who are on a basketball team or somebody who plays softball. Like, I do think that there's that team-like mentality in a dojo that you can get from other sports, but there's also specific details like how do you tie your belt? I think most people think that you just tie it like normal, but then it hangs really low down your legs, and inevitably, everyone's first class, they tie it the wrong way, and somebody has to say, oh, it's your first class, let me help you. So that made its way into the movie, and just the relationship between colors and of the belts, like how you feel a sense of ownership of that color and a sense of pride, even though it's just a piece of fabric. I mean, the techniques that you know and the things that you learn are inside of you. They're not in the belt, but people feel this really weird connection to just this random belt. All of those experiences from doing jiu-jitsu made their way into the script, and I think I was able to make fun of it a little bit more too, because it's something that I do myself. I have no delusions that I look cool wearing a gi and a belt. It is a very silly thing being an adult wearing that, but I also felt like it was kind of a really striking image for a film, and seeing adults walking around in that, it makes me laugh. I don't know.
But yet, yeah, within this world, there's kind of a suspension of disbelief. You truly believe in your color, standing there in the row. I mean, this is what happens generally, you know, within this context.
It's not too exaggerated. I think people feel that connection for sure.
Well, I had the impression, or not the impression, the film lives off the deadpan sense of humor that is weaved through your script, and also how you directed the film. And I was wondering how much of the humorous parts were scripted, how much did you rehearse and try to get the timing right, and how much of that maybe even happened while editing, because I think the editing is quite outstanding.
Sure. I mean, I tend to not encourage rehearsals unless actors like to rehearse. I do think that there's definitely a benefit to discussing things. We spent several days talking our way through the script. Jesse it wasn't even, I thought that it might have been a thing where he was going to go through and that you might have wanted to change things, but you made it very clear early on that it was just that you wanted to understand where the character is coming from and what the lines kind of meant. And every time we would read something and I would feel like, oh, maybe that doesn't work, you would almost always back me up and say, no, like, this is good. Like, don't change it.
The questions I had, and like I know like people here didn't see the movie. When you see the movie, you'll realize that it takes place in this very unusual world where the characters say exactly what they're thinking. Where it's not funny like there are no shots in the movie of a character looking at something strange and like rolling their eyes like, oh god, like, well, this guy's weird. There's no audience like surrogate. There's no like person in the movie who the audience looks to realize that it's not normal. And so in most comedies, especially like in the last like, you know, I don't know, especially like through the 90s, like, you know, there'd be somebody doing something weird, and then there'd be our protagonist looking on going, this is weird. And that's not like this kind of movie. That's what makes this movie take place in its own world, is that there's no in for the audience to realize it's weird. And so like the month before we were shooting, I just asked you every day, just tell me this is not like Meet the Parents or something, like where a guy's doing something weird and then I'm supposed to go like, this is, you know, where there's no like indicator to the audience that what's happening on screen is weird. The character, the protagonist, is in on it, is part of the oddity.
There's an earnestness to everybody's dialogue and
right.
intentions. It's very literal, it's very black and white, and Jesse's character in particular is like a sponge or like an infant. Everything that he's being told, he just soaks up, and he does, and for better or for worse. And
yeah, like the sensei is like this kind of authoritarian cult leader like figure, and he tells me, your name sounds like a woman's name, and you should play different music. And my character just says, okay, I'll play different music. And he's just like a child, like he just is being told what to do. And he's like, you should go punch that person. I'll go, okay, I'll go punch the person. Like the character is so pure and innocent that he looks to this kind of like father-like figure of the guy who runs the dojo as an all-knowing leader. And doesn't question him. And so it makes the character very sweet, but also very dangerous. So, the commentary in this movie, part of the commentary becomes like the way that these people can become radicalized. It's interesting, especially in a country like Germany that constantly questions, how do people become radicalized and everything from normal people. The movie like talks about this kind of thing. How do people become radicalized from like, this kind of otherwise a normal guy.
Yeah, and also getting back to the script and like how much improv. There was no improv in the film. I'm very specific in the way that the dialogue's written, and to the actors' credit, they trusted me. And if we ever had questions or we decided to change something on the day, those discussions were had. But 99.9% of the movie is scripted, even down to the way that it's shot. I would say that it reads like it's going to be cut. So the actors always kind of knew where we would be, where we were going. And then in the edit, with my editor, Sarah Beth Shapiro, she also edited my first feature, Faults. We have a very good working relationship where she kind of knows what tone I'm going for, and there's a specific cutting style. I don't like to cut in the middle of people's lines. I like to kind of punctuate the lines with the edits. And so it's finding that rhythm in the edit as well. But like you said, it's not necessarily changing the dialogue, but it's finding the subtlety and the humor. The main thing was just that every line of dialogue that's ridiculous has to be said as if they mean it, and that's where the humor comes from. At South by Southwest, Frank Oz, the great Frank Oz, came up to me after one of the screenings, and it took me a few seconds to realize who he was in front of me. But he said, "Hi, my name is Frank Oz, and young man, you did exactly what you're supposed to do. You can never play comedy or the jokes for laughs. You have to play it seriously, and that's where the humor comes from." And it was just nice to have his like kind of stamp of approval, because I feel like that was something that I already wanted to do and was kind of trying to figure out on my own. But more and more, I'm realizing that it's a method that people have used for forever, and it's a very delicate method, but I do enjoy like exploring it.
Yeah, that's right. There's, just Uta Hagen, is she German? Uta Hagen, a great acting teacher. I think she might be German. It sounds like a German name, certainly. She has a famous line, which is that she was doing a play, and at one point during the play, somebody asks for a piece of gum, and the audience laughs, because it's set up to be a funny thing. And one time they didn't laugh, and she said, "Well, yes, of course, darling, because you asked for the laugh, not the gum." And that's the thing. You're supposed to ask for the gum, not the laugh. You play it earnestly, and people will come.
I'll use that from now on.
Yes, the gum.
Maybe just one more detail about the lines we have in the script. Is it also a mixture, as you said, it's very sincere, of outer world and inner world that you were thriving for, so that you have, I would say, like normal dialogue plus inner dialogue on screen. Yeah, exactly. It feels like that.
Yes, the subtext is the text. The character said, I'm very upset right now because of this particular thing, as opposed to like just saying, "Damn it," they would say, "I'm very upset, I'm going to hit this," so.
Yeah. Like there's a scene where Jesse's character comes up with this idea, and Sensei likes this idea a lot, and he literally says, it's a very wonderful idea, I wish I had thought of it. And it's just like that. I'm jealous I didn't think of it. And he, instead of just kind of internalizing that, he just externalizes it immediately, and your character takes it as a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no second layer of like Freudian psychology in terms of like having an ulterior motive and then trying to use various methods to get a person to do something. They just say like, "You go and do this right now." And so like, okay. Yeah.
Other questions from your side? If so, please go to the. You have to go to the microphone, please, so we can be heard.
I can also hand you.
Okay, let's do it this way.
Okay. Well, I saw the film yesterday. I had the feeling you just shot the film, and afterwards you did the editing, and afterwards you made the story and script. That was the impression. If it was like that in reality, I don't know. And you have collected a lot of materials, film materials, and sometimes it was abrupt. There was no flow in the film. Okay. You couldn't entice the public. That public is absolutely awakened and watching every second, every moment. That was I was missing in the film. There was a joke. There was so many ideological things in the film. It's okay. But there was no flow in the film.
I'm sorry. I think that's more of an observation, also a philosophical one, if I may add.
It's like the difference between like what he was saying is like if you edit the movie so that like a character says a line and then the film cuts to the other character, so what you're describing is a more naturalistic kind of movie where you would edit a scene and the character would be talking and you would edit while the character's talking. It gives the audience the impression that you're in on the conversation, whereas what Riley is doing is a more interesting kind of style, which is a kind of bluntness to support the themes of the movie. So the characters talk about masculinity in the movie in such a blunt way because it's a commentary on how absurd masculinity has become, so he's using that style in order to create the impression of a kind of satirical bluntness. So it's not supposed to have the flow of a kind of French New Wave movie where it's it's supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be kind of like a postmodern style. More like, I don't know, like who was doing that well, like David Lynch or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate Yorgos Lanthimos' style. I appreciate Paul Thomas Anderson and the Coen brothers and people who, it doesn't always have to be naturalistic. You can get away with experimentation, and it's not going to be for everybody. I have no, I guess, again, delusions of this being like a crowd-pleasing film, but I do hope that people kind of go into it with an open mind and say it's okay to explore filmmaking in a way that hasn't necessarily been the norm for the past 100 years. So, but I appreciate your comment.
It's also a very timely film, I must say, about our present times. Would you say it's an Americana, or is it a film about the whole world and like a structure, power structures really becoming toxic, or masculinity, as you said, and that we finally have to go over it? So is it very specific for the US, or do you feel like it's talking to very global audiences? Because I personally think it's worldwide what we perceive now.
Well, I think from the perspective of myself writing it, it was almost just like such a personal thing, and then I started relating it to kind of American men, and then as it's been playing festivals in the United States, I've been meeting women who relate to it in a different kind of way, and then I've met people who are trans who relate to it in a very different kind of way, and then it's been playing international festivals now, and people are relating to it in a way that I wasn't expecting. I think every single time it kind of surprises me that people relate to it in such a way, because it really was just like a guy who grew up lower middle class in a suburb in Texas, and he's white, and he's a guy, and like that was my point of view. Like I can't pretend to be somebody else who I'm not. So that was where I was coming at it from. But I think that at the end of the day, I wrote something that I hope the message, as cheesy as it may sound or as direct as it is, I just hope that it makes people feel like it's okay to be yourself. And so it's. I think I was asked the question last night at in the intro or at the Q&A. What does masculinity mean to you? What does it mean to be a man? And I don't think it's about that. I do think that it's more just gender. Or like it's not about gender. It's about self-worth and understanding of oneself. But yeah, I do love that people are relating to it in a way that I wasn't expecting.
The funny thing being what you said, the commentary on getting radicalized in certain ways. I mean, as German audiences, of course, we react very intensely to specific scenes, you know, when it comes, where the film is taking us to ever darker and darker territory. But on the funny side, I must say, I think Munich audiences also react very directly to having a Dachshund in the film. I mean, is it a common dog in the US?
Well, I grew up with Dachshunds. So
Okay,
I had a Dachshund growing up, and I have a Dachshund now. My parents actually have her because it's just better for her like well-being. She's very happy there, and they have a Dachshund as well, so they get to be friends and have fun. But I've always loved Dachshunds, and then on top of it, I felt like it really was just this perfect definition of Casey. It's his best friend is this Dachshund, and then it's not like even in the beginning of the movie, he sees a men's magazine, and it tells him that wolves are actually the more masculine pet, and that he should own a wolf. And he looks over, and he's got this dachshund. I just love that it's so personal, again, so personal to me. And then I come to Munich, and everyone's obsessed with dachshunds as well. So it's like it was meant to be. And then there's German in the film by chance. Like it's almost like too weird, yeah. But dachshunds are very cute, and the casting process for the dachshund was amazing. Having them bring in dachshunds, and I got to play with them and decide which one to pick. And it was like I was like, am I working? This isn't work. It was the best day on the entire shoot.
There's actual casting sessions for dogs?
Yeah, and none of the dogs. We were in Louisville, Kentucky, and none of the dogs were trained movie dogs. They were all just house pets, and none of them worked. They were all too either excitable, or this dog was actually a nervous wreck. And the casting was amazing, but I also was very, very scared at that point that we weren't going to find a dog for the movie. But the owner of the dog that we ended up using, Mocha, the owner's, her owner, sorry, is a pet psychic. And she emailed my producer and informed us that when she got home, she had a conversation with Mocha and said that, like, I'm sorry, I should have set you up a little bit better for this. I should have explained, you need to take care of this director. He needs you. Riley needs you. And so this is your job, though. You're going to do this. And she wrote us and said, well, Mocha knows now. Mocha's going to be good. And my producer, Cody, was like, we're down to the wire, Riley. I have no idea why I believe this woman, but I believe her. And I said, oh, my God, Cody, are you serious? She was like, I think I'm serious. And I was like, okay, well, this is on you. Let's get a backup dog, too. First day, Mocha comes in, a completely different dog. Like, she had a conversation, like she said, and did everything we needed her to do, and we sent the other dog home and never had a problem with Mocha. It was incredible. I still don't believe in pet psychics, but that was incredible.
There's a question over there.
Yeah, I think in Germany we generally have a tendency to spend a very long time writing, like 8 months, just writing through and sending it across different panels and have politicians sort of mix in and so forth. And that sounds very different from what you did, writing it in 2 weeks. I mean, after thinking about it, obviously, for half a year. And I'm curious how much you think of the message you're planning on getting across, as opposed to just thinking, okay, I'm going to write a funny movie and then hope it ends up having a cool message.
I mean, it's not necessarily thinking about a message, but I knew what I wanted to say. I knew it was less about telling people what to think and more about, I'm going to put my thoughts and fears into this, and maybe people will find that relatable. But yeah, it's funny that you write the script and then after the fact, especially because I had made one feature already, so it was immediately going to go out to producers who had seen the first movie and were interested or what have you. You have to put together kind of a director's statement. And at that point, it's just kind of trying to distill all these thoughts that you put into a script that you had 100 pages to think about, and then and kind of like expand upon. And then you have to write 3 paragraphs about what the movie means to you and what you're trying to say, and that is excruciatingly hard. So that's at the point where I start thinking, okay, what is this trying to say? Like, it's funny that I don't actually, now that you say it, I don't think I think about that while I'm in the writing process. It comes after the fact, and yeah, I think that stuff is all there, but sometimes you got to kind of like really sift through and say, what was I trying to say? I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's so hard, though, the director's statements. I never understand how I'm supposed to write them or what I'm supposed to say. I think in this one, I put in, it's like Fight Club, and it's like whatever. I think I put Dr. Strangelove and all these things that now I look at, I'm like, it's nothing like any of those things. But you try to get people excited, and so I played the game of, it's blank meets blank. But yeah, that's it. The movie, I feel like, is its own thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, thank you.
Well, you just mentioned the casting process for the dogs, but I was also wondering about the casting process of the other actors. When did Imogen Poots and Alessandro Nivola come into the project? Yeah, I mean, Jesse was the first one that we brought on, and then once he was signed on, we had to move, because Jesse's schedule was very particular, and his agent, to his credit, really figured out that this could fit perfectly within this one window. And so we decided we're going to do it. We're going to take that chance and we're going to put this together. I think shortly after Jesse came on board, I had a Skype with Imogen. I was a huge fan of her in Green Room in particular, and that film, I was blown away with her and what she was able to do. And then Jesse had actually worked with her before, so he had a working relationship and also a friendship, and knew that she was a good person and that she was professional. And at the end of that Skype, you're not supposed to do this, I found out after the fact, but I said, so I guess the part's yours if you want it. And producer's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess that's okay, that's fine. But she said yes, and she and Jesse started doing some training in New York for some of the fight scenes that we're going to be doing later on. And then Alessandro, I mean, that part was a lot harder to cast. I think a lot of people were very afraid of it. And to Alessandro's credit, I mean, I had never seen him do anything like this, but at the same time, I think it was his confidence saying, yes, I can do it. I mean, he was cast 3 days before we started shooting. He said yes. He not only said yes, he had this confidence about him, and I think that really just kind of
I don't know, in a weird way put me at ease, even though I should have been terrified at the moment. And he came in, and the very first day he had his opening monologue in the movie, which also involves fight choreography at the same time, and he knocked it out of the park, and we were just all kind of like, oh my God, this guy is incredible. And I think one thing that I really liked as well is that he's kind of a character actor. You see him in a lot of things, but he's not really known for one thing. And it helped create a character that audiences watch and they don't already have this preconceived notion of who he is or how he acts. So he really slipped into the role in a way that I think is disarming, and kind of, as the movie goes along, the weirdness, his more dark side kind of sneaks up on you.
Jesse, we're totally glad that you are here now, but you've been here a year ago, basically last year, shooting in Bavaria. And I wanted to ask you, how was the time that you spent here? You were shooting in Munich. You were also shooting around around Nuremberg for a film called Resistance, playing Marcel Marceau. And when you come back, you come back to a place that you somehow already know. So I would like to know more about how you felt last year coming here and getting to know the place.
One is, like, I was so honored to be asked to come to the festival, and then also like equally surprised that you chose this movie to open the festival, only because this movie, as Riley said, feels like it's a very personal movie to Riley. It feels like a very personal movie to me. The tone feels like, again, it's like my favorite movie. This is like, if I was just an audience member, this would be like my favorite movie of all time. But I also think it's like this very strange thing that, like, I feel like it's this thing only I would like. Or I think Riley feels like this is the movie that only I would like. But I think that's what makes it so special. I think a lot of people have that feeling about it. This is a movie that only I would like. And but I was so surprised, especially because of what I had previously done here, which is such a different movie, a more kind of like classical World War II movie. So I was so pleasantly surprised. My experience in Munich here was like every minute that I had free was spent with my 2-year-old son looking for like a playground for him to jump on. So like everything I remember about Munich is not like your famous beer halls or anything. It's just like if there's a slide somewhere, I know exactly where it is in this town. And so, like, just walking around, I remember, like, oh, right, this is where he threw his toys into the water while watching the guys surf, and I had to, like, put my hand in the thing. And, and this is where he ran into the street because the slide was too, steep. So that's what I remember of Munich, but it was such an amazing experience to shoot here because, like, unlike in America, like, we had, like $1 million or something to shoot this movie. It was a tiny budget for what it is. Now it's, like, a popular movie that people love, but at the time it felt like this very small project, whereas to do a movie here, like, which was half paid for by the Bavarian government, we felt like we had just unbelievable resources for an independent movie. And it taught me so much about the way, like, you guys as a culture value the arts in a way that America as a kind of just as a state doesn't. We had to get money from basically, wealthy individuals, whereas, here, the Bavarian government paid for this independent movie, which tells this really important story, and, even has, even is controversial, speaking to the German, history. So I was so honored that we were able to do the movie here, and then to come back with this too. So I have a really special feeling towards Bavaria.
Thank you, Jesse, but I have to correct you in that sense that it's not the normal model. It's only select films where you get like a good financing, and Resistance being one of them. From Germany looking to the US, of course, it's always the other way around.
Really?
Often enough here, films are kind of underfinanced. You have like very tiny budgets, and some of them have these bigger budgets, and Resistance will surely be one of these films.
But there's no equivalent of state funding.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
We don't have that. What we do have is like certain states will say they'll make they'll give us like tax credits, which is
what happened
Louisville,
with Kentucky
did.
Yeah.
Right.
But the state as like doesn't give money to a movie.
Unfortunately not. I mean, even Canada has just a better incentive for making movies where the government helps pay for them. And obviously, there's a small amount of movies that get it, but we don't have anything like that in the United States, which is a shame. Yeah.
Now the interesting thing is, just to add on it, it would be hard to get financing for your film within the public
this would never
system,
get financed
because
by government ever.
Your film is a pure result. You can only see what it is when it is done, like absolutely, how especially it is. And as you said, director statements are so important within the German framework, ever more important to get the financing, and that would be a tough time.
You've got a
Over there is a question.
Yeah, a question for Jesse. We live in times where millions of people seem to turn into little hobby paparazzi with their smartphone cameras, and some of them can be very rude. So I was wondering, do you sometimes wish you might use your karate skills to defend yourself against these aggressive people?
I know like 2 moves, so it'd be a very if I didn't knock them down in 2 moves, they would win. So yeah, I don't know enough. But
Both deadly.
well, yeah, they're both deadly, of course. Yeah. No, but I mean, people take pictures of me. I mean, it's normal, you know. But no, I always think like the benefits of being like a recognizable person is like so far outweighs, you know, people taking pictures of me. The amount of free stuff that I get, I cannot even make a list for you of shoes and meals and everything. It so outweighs the, you know, comparatively minor annoyance of people taking a picture of me on the subway. Yeah.
Do you still ride the subway without being harassed?
I even ride the subway, yeah. Mostly for charity now, but yeah, no, I do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, talking about mobile phones, the film completely lacks any modern technology. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about why you chose to completely leave that out and.
Yeah, I mean, technology-wise, the film kind of just wants to be in its own world. So we've got VHS tapes paired with CDs and cars from the 2000s and then TVs from the 70s. Like, I just didn't want it to feel like it was dated. I didn't want somebody to watch it a year from now and say, or sorry, a few years from now and say, oh, that came out in 2019. It feels very 2019. So one of the things that ends up happening is that cell phones are just so recognizable, and I also feel like they are often a disservice to the story. Your character has no real motivation sometimes if they can just Google where something is, or if like you have to figure out how do I make them lose cell phone reception, or how's the battery going to run out? What'd they do that made them not charge it that night before? And that's just not fun. That's just not storytelling. And instead of explaining all of that away, you just don't put them in the movie. And I think because it's its own world and it lives kind of in its own space, I was able to do that and get away with it. Similar to in the movie, there's just oftentimes no repercussions for the characters for very, very horrible things that happen. And if you don't explain it, it doesn't matter. And I think that freedom was really nice, and it allowed for telling the story that I wanted to tell instead of having to stop and kind of appease the logic police. Yeah.
It was still funny to me you would use not a DV camera, but also a VHS camera as a certain story device within the film. So there is, of course, like a very fetish quality to these to objects that are from a different time.
Yeah, it's just, I also just tend to think that analog devices look more interesting. The next movie that I do takes place in kind of now, but something that I really liked was the film It Follows several years ago. There were cell phones, but it was like they invented their own style of cell phone. So it's not going to be dated in the sense that an iPhone 7 pops up on screen. There's like a seashell that pops open, and it's almost just in its own world, even though that movie didn't have to do that. And I think that was a very interesting choice. And so maybe that's a route that I'll go to do it. But also just even giving myself a headache thinking about the fact that I've written out text messaging in this next movie. And just having how do you make that interesting? Like, so I've seen people do it, but you also don't want to be derivative of what they do. But that kind of challenge seems exciting this time around. But I just didn't want it to weigh down anything in this movie.
Please.
Hi, I just wanted to know what was different about making a second feature, and how much of the crew you kind of brought on into this one. I know you mentioned the editor, and Jesse, I was wondering what it was like to do a second film. I don't know if it's a second film, but I know you did Vivarium with Imogen Poots, and how was that?
Yeah, for me, second feature, I think you know what it's going to take. I think the first feature, the hardest thing was leading up to it, and even the day before, just going, why am I doing this? Like, you really start questioning. All you wanted to do I mean, in my case, since I was 19, that's when I really decided I wanted to make movies. I was a little bit later to start. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to make a feature. If I could make a feature, I could die happy. And then the day before, you go, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, this is a nightmare. Somebody else, no, I'm not this person. I'm not a director. And I think that the second time around, you at least know that you're capable of it. You learn lessons along the way. You learn what not to do. But I think every film, I'm realizing you're going to learn more things that you should not do and things that you should do. I brought my cinematographer, Michael Reagan, on. He did my first short, and he's done everything since then. Sarah Beth Shapiro is my editor. I brought my composer, Heather McIntosh. And then we tried out a lot of new people and some people that I know that I'm going to work with from now on. Production designer Charlotte Royer was incredible, and I would work with her again in a heartbeat. The one thing that we really did actively do on this movie is because it's a film about men starring almost entirely men, other than Imogen Poots, was that we actively put more women behind the scenes, especially in department head roles. And it's not even just a matter of saying, there's a guy and a girl, let's pick the girl. It was really, we ended up just saying, oh my God, they're so much better than the guy. Like every single person that we found was the best person for the job, and also in that independent space. But we did make the decision, let's put as many women as possible behind the scenes. And I think you look at our crew picture and it's predominantly women, even in some of the below the line levels. And that was really exciting for me.
In terms of like acting with the same people, I've done like a few movies with the same people, and like it's not always an advantage, because part of the problem is like if you know somebody well, like then like every time you're acting with somebody, you have to kind of like forget what you know about them, because those things become distractions, and it's like sometimes easier. Like Alessandro Nivola came in the day before we were filming, and so I still don't really know him that well, because I only knew him through working on this movie, and the days were so long. We were filming the whole time, as opposed to having a lot of downtime like you would on maybe a bigger movie or whatever. So and so I only was knowing him as this guy, Sensei. I had also not seen him in a movie before, so it was this incredibly like real experience for me of knowing this guy who behaves this way, and he's an eccentric, and I don't know anything else about him, and I don't know his kids or his real wife or whatever. And so that's quite helpful. Like sometimes you can get into like bad habits with actors that you're friends with, because you kind of make each other laugh rather than, like, because you know what the other person or you're doing a bad thing of like looking at yourself through their eyes, knowing what they think of you. Like the analogy I would give is like if you ever acted in like a school play, like knowing that your mother is in the audience is the worst possible distraction. But if there was 1,000 people and you knew none of them, it would be really comfortable. But just knowing that one of them is your mom is the most distracting thing, because you're perceiving yourself through the eyes that you know they would perceive you with. And so Imogen is amazing. I'd love to do tons of movies with her, because we have the similar taste, and she does great movies, and she's a really great actress. But it's not always an easy shorthand that one might think.
It's also really funny as an aside. He had done a movie with Imogen before, did The Art of Self-Defense, and then the following year did Vivarium, where Imogen, the roles are reversed. Imogen's predominantly the lead, I would say, right, of that one, and then so they've now done 3 movies together, and a friend of mine directed that film, so we're now starting to pop up at the same festivals. I'm hoping that I get to go at some point and be with Lorcan at the same time, the director of that film, but he actually he ended up texting me and saying, would you be freaked out if I cast Jesse and Imogen in my movie? And I was like, no, of course not. Like, I want good people to work with good people. So that was really nice and exciting to see. And then it premiered at Cannes and is doing very well. And it's just fun to have those 2 films, like sister films in a weird way. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited to see it.
Thanks.
Hope you enjoy.
So, thank you so much for your time, for being here with us. And the premiere will be at 7:30 of the film, and The Art of Self-Defense will play again on Sunday on 2:30, and next Friday on 10:30 in the night. Oh, wow. So thank you once again. It's a great film, and we love it so much, and we really love this opening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.